Welcome back, deep divers. Ready for another fascinating journey into the inner workings of the human body?
You bet. And today, we're diving deep into one of the most intricate and essential control systems, the nervous system. Buckle up, folks. It's going to be a wild ride.
That's right. And to make it even more exciting, we're zeroing in on a specific branch, the autonomic nervous system, the part that keeps things ticking over without you even having to lift a finger.
Yeah, think about it. Your heartbeat, your breathing, your digestion, all happening automatically thanks to this incredible network of nerves and chemical messengers.
And speaking of chemical messengers, that's where things get really interesting. Today's deep dive focuses on two key players, adrenergic and cholinergic neurotransmitters.
These little guys are the communication specialists of the autonomic nervous system, sending signals back and forth to regulate all those vital functions we mentioned.
We've got a mountain of source material here, folks. Research papers, medical texts, pharmacology reviews, and our mission is to distill it down, to extract the core concepts of how these automatic processes are managed chemically.
And even more importantly, how they can be influenced therapeutically. We're talking about medications, folks, drugs that can either mimic or block these neurotransmitters to treat a whole range of conditions.
From heart disease to respiratory problems, even neurological disorders, understanding this system is crucial for grasping how many common medications work.
Precisely. By the end of this deep dive, you'll have a much clearer picture of how your body's internal control systems function at a chemical level and how we can target them for therapeutic benefit.
All right, let's kick things off with a little Anatomy 101. We need to lay the groundwork here. So tell us about the basic division of the nervous system.
Sure thing. The nervous system, as you might know, is this incredibly complex network of specialized cells called neurons that carry electrical and chemical signals throughout your body.
It's like the body's electrical wiring, right?
Yeah.
Sending messages from the brain to every nook and cranny.
Spot on. Now, we can divide the nervous system into two main parts. The central nervous system, or CNS, which includes your brain and spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system, or PNS, which encompasses all the nerves that branch out from the CNS to the rest of your body.
Okay, so the CNS is like the command center and the PNX is the network carrying out those commands.
Exactly. Now, within the PNS, we have another important division, the somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system.
Ah, there it is, the autonomic nervous system, our star of the show.
Indeed. Now, the somatic nervous system is responsible for voluntary control of your skeletal muscles. Think about moving your arm, walking, talking. Those are all actions initiated by the somatic nervous system.
So it's the part we're consciously aware of, the one we directly control.
Right. But the autonomic nervous system, on the other hand, operates largely outside of our conscious awareness. It's the control center for all those vital functions we mentioned earlier: heart rate, blood pressure, breathing, digestion, and even things like sweating and sexual arousal.
It's the silent but powerful force keeping everything running smoothly in the background.
Exactly. And what's even more fascinating is that the autonomic nervous system itself is further divided into two main branches: the sympathetic nervous system, often called the SNS, and the parasympathetic nervous system, or PNS.
Two branches. It's like a dual control system.
Precisely. They work together, often in opposing ways, to maintain a delicate balance within the body. Think of it like a car. The sympathetic system is the gas pedal, revving things up, while the parasympathetic system is the brake, slowing things down.
So in a stressful situation, the sympathetic system kicks in, getting you ready for fight or flight.
You got it. Your heart races, your breathing speeds up, your pupils dilate, all those classic signs of adrenaline surging through your body.
And the parasympathetic system takes over when it's time to rest and digest.
Right. It slows your heart rate, lowers your blood pressure, and shifts your focus to digestion and energy conservation.
Fascinating. Now, I remember reading that both the sympathetic and parasympathetic pathways involve a two-neuron relay system. Can you break down how that works?
Sure. So imagine a signal originating in the CNS, like a command from the brain saying, increase heart rate. This signal travels down the spinal cord and reaches a preganglionic neuron.
So this is the first neuron in the relay.
Exactly. Its axon, the long, slender projection of the neuron, extends out from the CNS and connects to a ganglion.
What's the ganglion?
It's basically a cluster of nerve cell bodies located outside the CNS in the peripheral nervous system. Think of it as a relay station.
Okay, so the signal arrives at this relay station. What happens next?
At the ganglion, the preganglionic neuron synapses, that is, connects with a second neuron called the postganglionic neuron. The signal is then passed across this synapse to the postganglionic neuron.
So it's a two-step process from the CNS to the ganglion, and then from the ganglion to the target organ.
Precisely. And it's at these synapses where those chemical messengers we mentioned earlier, the neurotransmitters, come into play. They are the key to transmitting the signal from one neuron to the next and ultimately to the target organ.
Okay, so let's talk about these neurotransmitters, the languages of the autonomic nervous system. We've got acetylcholine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine. Which ones are used where?
Here's the interesting part. Preganglionic neurons in both the sympathetic and parasympathetic pathways release acetylcholine.
So acetylcholine is the universal messenger for that first step in the relay.
Right. Now, when we look at the postganglionic neurons, things diverge a bit. In the parasympathetic system, the postganglionic neurons also release acetylcholine.
So acetylcholine is involved in both steps of the parasympathetic pathway.
Correct. But in the sympathetic system, most postganglionic neurons release norepinephrine, also known as noradrenaline.
Okay, so norepinephrine is the main player in the sympathetic system. What about epinephrine or adrenaline? Where does that fit in?
Epinephrine is a bit special. It's primarily released into the bloodstream by the adrenal medulla, which is the inner part of your adrenal gland.
Those adrenal glands always associated with stress and adrenaline rushes.
Right. So when the sympathetic system is activated, it sends a signal to the adrenal medulla, triggering the release of epinephrine into circulation.
So it's like a hormonal reinforcement of the sympathetic response, reaching even more tissues throughout the body.
Exactly. It amplifies the fight or flight response.
Now let's delve into the different types of receptors these neurotransmitters bind to. We've got nicotinic and muscarinic receptors for acetylcholine, and adrenergic receptors for norepinephrine and epinephrine.
Okay, starting with acetylcholine. Nicotinic receptors are found on postganglionic neurons in both the sympathetic and parasympathetic pathways.
So they are the ones receiving the initial acetylcholine signal from the preganglionic neurons.
Correct. These nicotinic receptors are ion channels, meaning when acetylcholine binds to them, they open up, allowing ions to flow into the postganglionic neuron. This flow of ions creates an electrical signal that propagates down the neuron.
It's like flipping a switch to activate the next neuron in the chain.
A very fast and efficient switch. Now, muscarinic receptors are found on the target organs themselves, the heart, the lungs, the digestive tract, where they receive acetylcholine released by the postganglionic parasympathetic neurons.
So they are the ones mediating the final effects of the parasympathetic system.
Precisely. Unlike nicotinic receptors, which are ion channels, muscarinic receptors are coupled to G proteins.
G proteins, what are those?
They are intracellular signaling molecules that trigger a cascade of events inside the target cell when activated. It's a more complex and nuanced process than simply opening an ion channel.
Okay, so nicotinic is like a quick on-off switch, while muscarinic is more like a dimmer switch, modulating the target organ's activity in a more nuanced way.
That's a good analogy. Now let's move on to adrenergic receptors. These are the ones that bind norepinephrine and epinephrine, the main players in the sympathetic system.
And I understand there are different subtypes of adrenergic receptors, alpha and beta receptors, and even further subdivisions within those.
You're absolutely right. These subtypes are crucial for understanding the diverse and often opposing effects of the sympathetic nervous system.
Okay, let's break them down. What do alpha receptors do?
Alpha receptors, specifically alpha-1 receptors, are primarily responsible for vasoconstriction, the narrowing of blood vessels. This is why when you're stressed or anxious and your sympathetic system kicks in, you might feel your blood pressure rising.
So alpha-1 activation is like squeezing those blood vessels, increasing blood pressure.
Exactly. Alpha-2 receptors, on the other hand, have a more complex role. They are often found on presynaptic neurons, the neurons releasing norepinephrine, and their activation actually inhibits the release of norepinephrine, acting as a sort of negative feedback loop.
It's like a brake on the sympathetic system itself, preventing it from going into overdrive.
Precisely. Now moving on to beta receptors. Beta-1 receptors are predominantly found in the heart. When activated, they increase heart rate and contractility, essentially making your heart beat faster and stronger.
That's the classic adrenaline rush we hear so much about.
You got it. Beta-2 receptors, on the other hand, have a wider distribution. They are found in the airways where their activation causes bronchodilation, the relaxation and opening of the airways, making it easier to breathe. They are also found in skeletal muscle blood vessels, causing vasodilation, and in the liver, where they promote the breakdown of glycogen into glucose, providing quick energy.
So beta-2 activation is more about opening things up the airways, the blood vessels, and mobilizing energy stores for that fight or flight response.
Right. And then there are beta 3 receptors, which are primarily found in adipose tissue or fat cells, where their activation stimulates lipolysis, the breakdown of fat for energy.
Okay, so we've got this incredibly complex system with different neurotransmitters, different receptor subtypes, all working in concert to fine-tune our body's response to various stimuli.
It's a truly remarkable orchestration of chemical signals all happening automatically and keeping us alive and functioning.
Now, our source material also delves into a vast array of drugs that can interact with these systems, either mimicking or blocking those neurotransmitters. It's like pharmacology 101, right?
Absolutely. And understanding how these drugs work requires a good grasp of the underlying neurotransmitter systems and receptor subtypes we just discussed.
Let's start with the adrenergic drugs, the ones that affect the sympathetic nervous system. We'll begin with the agonists, the drugs that mimic the effects of norepinephrine and epinephrine. Epinephrine itself is actually used as a medication, right?
It is. It's a very potent drug with a wide range of effects due to its ability to activate both alpha and beta adrenergic receptors.
So it's like a double whammy, hitting both branches of the sympathetic system.
And its effects can vary depending on the dose. At lower doses, its beta effects, particularly vasodilation in certain blood vessels, tend to dominate. But at higher doses, the alpha effects, especially vasoconstriction, become much stronger.
It's like it has different gears depending on the concentration.
Precisely. Now, epinephrine is a crucial medication in emergency situations like anaphylactic shock.
Anaphylactic shock, that's a severe allergic reaction, right?
Yes, it's a life-threatening condition where your body overreacts to an allergen, causing widespread vasodilation, a drop in blood pressure, airway constriction, and difficulty breathing. Epinephrine counteracts these effects by constricting blood vessels, raising blood pressure, and opening up the airways.
It's like a lifeline in those critical moments.
Absolutely. It's also used to treat severe asthma attacks, where the bronchodilating effects of beta-2 activation are essential to open up the airways.
And I've heard it's added to local anesthetics sometimes.
That's right. The vasoconstriction it causes at the injection site helps to prolong the action of the anesthetic by slowing down its absorption into the bloodstream.
Keep it localized for a longer effect. Clever. But are there any downsides to using epinephrine?
Yes, because it's so potent, it can have side effects like anxiety, tremors, and even cardiac arrhythmias.
Okay, so it's a powerful drug to be used judiciously. Now, let's move on to norepinephrine. How does it compare to epinephrine as a medication?
Norepinephrine is also a powerful vasoconstrictor, primarily acting on alpha-1 receptors, but it has weaker beta-2 activity compared to epinephrine.
So it's more focused on raising blood pressure than on bronchodilation.
Right. Its main therapeutic use is in the treatment of shock, particularly septic shock, where blood pressure drops dangerously low due to widespread vasodilation.
It's like clamping down on those leaky blood vessels, bringing the blood pressure back up.
Exactly. But similar to epinephrine, it can also cause anxiety. And because it's such a potent vasoconstrictor, there is a risk of tissue damage if it leaks out of the vein at the injection site.
Got it. Potent, but needs careful administration. Now, what about isoproterenol?
Isoproterenol is interesting because it's a non-selective beta agonist, meaning it activates both beta-1 and beta-2 receptors equally.
So it's hitting both the heart and the lungs.
Right. It increases heart rate and contractility via beta-1, and it causes bronchodilation via beta-2. It also causes vasodilation in skeletal muscles, so it can actually lower blood pressure despite stimulating the heart.
It's like a mixed bag of effects, stimulating the heart and opening up the airways, but also dilating blood vessels.
Exactly. Now, moving on to dopamine. It's a neurotransmitter primarily associated with reward and pleasure pathways in the brain, but it also has important effects on the cardiovascular system.
Wait, dopamine, the feel-good chemical.
The very same. Now, dopamine's effects depend on the dose. At lower doses, it activates dopamine receptors in the kidneys, increasing blood flow to those organs.
Affecting those vital kidneys.
Right. But at higher doses, it starts to activate beta-1 receptors in the heart, increasing heart rate and contractility. And at even higher doses, it can activate alpha-1 receptors, causing vasoconstriction.
So it's like a dose-dependent staircase of effects, starting with the kidneys, then the heart, then the blood vessels.
You got it. This makes dopamine useful in treating shock and heart failure, where its effects can be tailored to the patient's specific needs.
It's like a pharmacological Swiss Army knife. Now, what about phenylephrine and clonidine? They sound a bit different.
Phenylephrine is a selective alpha-1 agonist, meaning it primarily causes vasoconstriction. It's often used as a nasal decongestant because it constricts the blood vessels in the nasal mucosa, reducing swelling and congestion.
So it's the active ingredient in those nose sprays that open you right up.
Right. It can also be used to treat low blood pressure and as an eye drop to dilate pupils for eye exams. Now, clonidine works in a completely different way. It's an alpha-2 agonist that acts primarily in the brain.
The brain. So it's not directly affecting the heart or blood vessels like the other drugs we've discussed?
Correct. It works by activating alpha-2 receptors on neurons in the brainstem that control sympathetic outflow. This activation actually reduces sympathetic activity, leading to a decrease in blood pressure and heart rate.
It's like hitting the brake on the sympathetic nervous system at its source in the brain.
Exactly. This makes clonidine useful in treating hypertension and also in managing withdrawal symptoms from opioids, nicotine, and benzodiazepines.
Interesting how it tackles both physical and psychological dependence. Now, what about those beta-2 agonists we hear so much about, salmeterol and formoterol? They are used in inhalers for asthma, right?
Right. These are long-acting beta-2 agonists, or LABAs for short. They specifically target beta-2 receptors in the airways, causing bronchodilation relaxation and opening of the airways for an extended period.
They're like the mainstay of asthma treatment, providing long-lasting relief from those constricted airways.
Exactly. They are often used in combination with inhaled corticosteroids to manage asthma and COPD effectively. But it's important to note that using LABAs alone without an inhaled corticosteroid can actually increase the risk of asthma-related death.
So the combination therapy is crucial for safety and efficacy. Now, we also have amphetamine and cocaine listed as adrenergic agonists, which might seem a bit surprising.
Yeah, those are definitely interesting cases. Amphetamine is a central nervous system stimulant that increases the release of dopamine and norepinephrine in the brain. It also has some direct effects on adrenergic receptors, causing vasoconstriction and increasing heart rate.
It's like a triple threat affecting both the brain and the cardiovascular system.
Right. And cocaine, while known for its euphoric and addictive properties, also has significant sympathomimetic effects. It blocks the reuptake of norepinephrine, dopamine, and serotonin, leading to an accumulation of these neurotransmitters in the synapse and potentiating their effects.
So it's like amplifying the natural signals of the sympathetic nervous system.
Exactly. This explains why cocaine use can lead to increased heart rate, blood pressure, and even seizures and heart attacks in severe cases.
Definitely a drug with serious risks. Now, what about ephedrine and pseudoephedrine? I recognize those names from over-the-counter cold and allergy medications.
Right. Ephedrine and pseudoephedrine are mixed-action adrenergic agonists. They both stimulate the release of norepinephrine and directly activate alpha and beta receptors, mimicking the effects of epinephrine and norepinephrine.
So they are like multitaskers, hitting multiple targets in the sympathetic system.
Exactly. They're often used as nasal decongestants and in some allergy medications due to their vasoconstricting and bronchodilating effects.
Okay, that was a comprehensive tour of the adrenergic agonists, the drugs that essentially step on the gas pedal of the sympathetic nervous system. Now let's switch gears and talk about the antagonists, the drugs that act as brakes, blocking the effects of norepinephrine and epinephrine. Phenoxybenzamine is listed first.
Phenoxybenzamine is a non-selective, irreversible alpha blocker, meaning it blocks both alpha-1 and alpha-2 adrenergic receptors, and the block is long-lasting.
Irreversible. That sounds pretty intense.
It is. It's primarily used to treat pheochromocytoma, a rare tumor of the adrenal medulla that secretes excessive amounts of catecholamines, leading to dangerously high blood pressure.
So it's like a heavy-duty weapon for a very specific condition.
Right. Now, phentolamine is another non-selective alpha blocker, but it's competitive and reversible, meaning its effects are shorter-lived. It can also cause something called epinephrine reversal.
Epinephrine reversal, what's that?
Normally, epinephrine activates both alpha and beta receptors, but if the alpha receptors are blocked by phentolamine, the beta effects become dominant. This means epinephrine can actually lower blood pressure instead of raising it in this situation.
That's counterintuitive. So the context, the presence of an alpha blocker, completely changes how epinephrine affects the body.
Exactly. Now, moving on to prazosin and terazosin. These are selective alpha-1 blockers, primarily used to treat hypertension by causing vasodilation and lowering blood pressure.
So they are like targeted vasodilators, specifically blocking the alpha-1 receptors responsible for vasoconstriction.
Precisely. But they can cause a first dose effect where the initial dose can cause a significant drop in blood pressure, leading to dizziness and lightheadedness.
So starting low and slow is key with these medications. Now, what about yohimbine? I've heard that one touted as a natural aphrodisiac.
Yohimbine is a selective alpha-2 blocker, and while it has been marketed for various conditions, including erectile dysfunction and weight loss, the scientific evidence supporting these claims is generally weak.
So perhaps not the miracle cure some claim it to be.
And it can actually have adverse effects, especially in people with heart conditions or anxiety disorders, so definitely not something to self-medicate with.
Okay, let's move on to the beta blockers, another major class of adrenergic antagonists. Propranolol is a classic example, right?
Yes, propranolol is a non-selective beta blocker, meaning it blocks both beta-1 and beta-2 receptors.
So it affects both the heart and the lungs.
Right. It slows down the heart rate and reduces the force of heart contractions via beta-1 blockade, which makes it useful in treating angina and high blood pressure.
It's like taking the edge off the heart's workload.
Exactly. But the beta-2 blockade can also cause bronchoconstriction, making it unsuitable for people with asthma or COPD.
So it's a double-edged sword in that regard.
Right. Now, there are also beta-1 selective blockers like metoprolol and Actinol, which primarily target the heart, minimizing the bronchoconstricting effects.
So a more targeted approach for those with respiratory problems.
Precisely. And then there are drugs like carvedilol and labetalol, which block both beta receptors and alpha-1 receptors.
So they combine the effects of beta blockers and alpha-1 blockers.
Exactly. This dual action makes them particularly useful in treating hypertension, especially in people who don't respond well to other medications.
A 1-2 punch against high blood pressure. Now, what about guanethidine and rizarpine? They also listed as adrenergic antagonists, but their mechanisms seem different.
Right. Guanethidine works by preventing the release of norepinephrine from sympathetic neurons, effectively reducing sympathetic activity.
It's like cutting off the supply lines for the sympathetic nervous system.
A good way to put it. And reserpine depletes the stores of norepinephrine in sympathetic neurons by preventing its reuptake into storage vesicles.
So it's like emptying the ammunition depot for the sympathetic system.
Exactly. Both drugs have been used to treat hypertension, but they are not as commonly used now due to their side effects.
Okay, that wraps up our discussion of the adrenergic antagonists, the drugs that dampen down the sympathetic nervous system. Now let's shift our focus to the cholinergic drugs, the ones that either mimic or enhance the effects of acetylcholine, the main neurotransmitter in the parasympathetic system.
Right, and we'll start with acetylcholine itself. It's actually used as a medication, but its use is limited because it's rapidly broken down in the body.
So it's not very practical for systemic administration.
Correct. Its main use is in ophthalmology, where it's used to constrict the pupil during eye surgery.
Keep that pupil nice and small for the surgeon to work. Now, what about other cholinergic agonists that might have more practical applications?
Pilocarpine is a direct-acting muscarinic agonist, meaning it activates muscarinic receptors, particularly the M3 subtype.
So it mimics the effects of acetylcholine at those muscarinic receptors.
Exactly. It's used to treat dry mouth, a condition where the salivary glands don't produce enough saliva.
Stimulating those salivary glands to get things flowing again.
Right. It's also used in eye drops to treat glaucoma by constricting the pupil and increasing fluid drainage from the eye.
Lowering that eye pressure. Now, what about pithanicol?
Pithanicol is another muscarinic agonist, but it primarily acts on the smooth muscles of the bladder and gastrointestinal tract.
So it's stimulating those muscles to contract.
Right. It's used to treat urinary retention, a condition where the bladder doesn't empty completely, and also to stimulate gut motility after surgery.
Getting those systems moving again. Now, carbachol seems a bit different.
Carbachol is unique because it activates both muscarinic and nicotinic receptors. It's primarily used in ophthalmology to constrict the pupil during surgery and to lower eye pressure after cataract surgery.
So it's hitting both types of acetylcholine receptors, making it a potent and versatile tool for ophthalmologists. Now let's move on to the cholinesterase inhibitors, the drugs that increase acetylcholine levels by blocking its breakdown. Physostigmine and neostigmine are two key examples.
Right. Physostigmine is a reversible cholinesterase inhibitor that can cross the blood-brain barrier, meaning it can act in both the central and peripheral nervous systems.
So it has broader reach than some other cholinergic drugs.
Correct. It's used to treat glaucoma and, importantly, to reverse the effects of anticholinergic poisoning.
Like an antidote for those anticholinergic drugs we'll talk about later.
Exactly. Now, neostigmine is also a reversible cholinesterase inhibitor, but it doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier as easily, so its effects are mainly in the peripheral nervous system.
More targeted to the periphery.
Right. It's used to treat myasthenia gravis, a condition where the communication between nerves and muscles is impaired, leading to muscle weakness.
So it boosts acetylcholine levels at those neuromuscular junctions, improving muscle strength.
Exactly. It's also used to reverse the effects of neuromuscular blocking drugs used during surgery.
Bringing those muscles back online after anesthesia. Now, we also have rivastigmine, donepezil, and tecrine listed here. They sound familiar from the context of Alzheimer's disease.
You're right. These are also reversible cholinesterase inhibitors, but their primary use is in treating the cognitive symptoms of Alzheimer's disease.
So they are trying to boost acetylcholine levels in the brain, where there's a significant loss of cholinergic neurons in Alzheimer's.
Precisely. The hope is to improve memory and cognitive function, even if temporarily.
It's like trying to compensate for the damage caused by the disease. Now, what about ecothiopate? It seems to be in a category of its own.
Ecothiopate is an irreversible cholinesterase inhibitor, meaning its effects are much longer lasting. It's primarily used to treat glaucoma by reducing the production of fluid in the eye.
Okay, so it's a potent and long-lasting option for controlling eye pressure. Now, let's wrap things up with the anticholinergic drugs, the ones that block acetylcholine's effects. Atropine is perhaps the most well-known example.
Atropine is a classic muscarinic antagonist, meaning it blocks the effects of acetylcholine at muscarinic receptors throughout the body.
So it's like the opposite of pilocarpine and bethanechol, which activate those receptors.
Exactly. It has a wide range of uses, including treating bradycardia, dilating pupils for eye exams, and reversing the effects of organophosphate poisoning.
It's like a multi-purpose tool for counteracting excessive cholinergic activity.
Right. Now, cyclopentolate is another anticholinergic used primarily in ophthalmology to dilate pupils for eye exams.
Those dreaded dilating drops that make everything blurry for a while.
The very same. And scopolamine is an anticholinergic that's effective in preventing motion sickness and postoperative nausea and vomiting.
It's like a lifesaver for those prone to motion sickness.
It can be, but it's important to note that it's contraindicated in people with certain types of glaucoma because it can increase eye pressure.
So definitely not for everyone. Now, ipratropium is another anticholinergic I recognize from inhalers used for COPD and asthma.
Right. Ipratropium is an inhaled anticholinergic that blocks muscarinic receptors in the airways, causing bronchodilation.
It's like the anticholinergic counterpart to those beta-2 agonists we discussed earlier.
Exactly. It's often used in combination with beta-2 agonists to provide broader relief from airway constriction.
A 1-2 punch against those tight airways. Finally, we have succinylcholine and tubocurarine, which sound like they belong in the operating room.
They do. These are neuromuscular blocking agents used to induce muscle paralysis during surgery.
So they are preventing muscle contractions, making it easier for the surgeon to operate.
Precisely. Succinylcholine is a depolarizing blocker, meaning it causes a brief period of muscle contraction followed by prolonged paralysis.
Interesting how it initially activates the muscle before paralyzing it.
Right. And tubocurarine is a non-depolarizing blocker, meaning it simply blocks acetylcholine from binding to its receptors, preventing muscle contraction.
So 2 different mechanisms for achieving the same goal, muscle relaxation.
Exactly.
Wow, that was a truly comprehensive deep dive into the autonomic nervous system and the drugs that modulate its activity. We've covered everything from the basic anatomy and neurotransmitters to a vast array of medications with diverse effects and applications.
It's a testament to the complexity and importance of the system and how understanding its intricacies allows us to develop targeted therapies for a wide range of conditions.
It's amazing to think that all of this intricate dance of chemical signals and feedback loops is happening constantly within our bodies, keeping us alive and functioning without us even having to think about it.
And it highlights the incredible power of pharmacology, how we can use drugs to manipulate these systems for therapeutic benefit, often in life-saving ways.
Now, for our listeners, here's a thought-provoking question to ponder. We've explored how various drugs can intentionally alter autonomic nervous system activity, but what about everyday activities and experiences? Think about exercise, stress, even things like meditation or listening to music. How might these seemingly mundane things be subtly influencing your autonomic nervous system, perhaps shifting the balance between sympathetic and parasympathetic activity? It's a fascinating area to explore and appreciate the interconnectedness of our minds, bodies and the chemical language that governs them.
That's a great point. We encourage you to delve deeper into these connections and discover how your daily choices and experiences might be impacting your internal state, often in ways you might not have realized before.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the autonomic nervous system. Until our next exploration, keep those neural pathways firing.
And remember, folks, knowledge is power when it comes to understanding your body and its intricate inner workings.